All right, we're recording now.
Do we
Anyone
have
want
to
to?
say?
I think
Sorry.
I think we can. Like our name is already showing, so I don't think we need to say our name. And we
Okay.
can. Uh,
Okay.
anyone want to start us off?
Sure, my name is Ren. And that's all.
My name's Isabel.
I'm Emma.
I'm Carrie.
And my name is Agapov.
So some of our opinions on the TED Talk, or my opinion on the TED Talk, to be clear. I thought it was really interesting how he illustrated the like cycle of how being European meant being civilized because they were Christians, and then like that cycle just like was used as an explanation of like why white was like the superior race. I thought that was very interesting and it surprised me. And I wrote down a lot about that. And I also thought that it was interesting how he brought up in the 60s that it was great and, you know, a lot of great stuff happened and came from that, but it also could be argued that it pushed racism like underground. And then on the second article, the Olio article, I loved how he mentioned that even though people of color didn't feel like that was their space to talk up and share their stories, that he still continued to show up and do those talks because he felt like it was important. And I think that is like important to do, if you feel like you're led to do that, to just continue to show up, even if you're not seeing the results that you feel like this talk deserves. And then in the last article, the painter article, I really liked the short video that basically was debunking a lot of myths that people use to write off racism, like I don't see color. So those were my opinions on the 3 readings that we had.
Yeah, so starting with the TED Talk, it taught me a lot about how socioeconomics played a role in the way that racism got its origins in America. So when he spoke about how there was this inability to keep white poor people out of the system, and if white coalitions merged with other races, they'd be able to basically overthrow the leaders of society. So they gave poor white people privilege and authority over poor colored people. And when he made that statement, it just made me think like, what an evil and manipulative way to maintain socioeconomic power and just pit the races against each other pretty much. And it doesn't make sense. And he expressed that a lot in his TED Talk. And I also felt like he expressed similar frustrations as the lady in the Aluko article. And the title of the article is already so powerful when she says, confronting racism is not about the needs and feelings of white people. But the TED Talk, when he talks about how whiteness was created by identifying people who are not white, and she spoke about in her article how, actually in the painter article, how that when neither scholars nor ordinary people have been able to agree upon the definition of white people, and this is a double standard considering how white people made the one-drop rule to racially define Black people in the 20th century United States. So from that alone, you can already see this inequality in that white people cannot be defined, but they can define other races, and it's just a tool of white supremacy. And I noticed similar frustrations in all the articles between people discussing this.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys kind of put out there. I thought they were all really interesting because I feel like she said, I put the questions in the chat that she had online, but like what surprises you? And I think that it's interesting to see like not only like in Learn, like she'll put like if you don't believe this, then like it was the article with all the like 10 points about white privilege, I think. It was like, if you don't believe this, then whatever. And I'm like, how does anyone not already know? Like, or not anyone, but nothing surprises me anymore, I guess, like saying that. And it's not like good, like everything, like it all sucks, like everything that we hear, basically. But I think it's interesting to go into this class and see how many people, I guess not specifically this class, but like going into like social work classes, and seeing how many people really don't know like about this kind of stuff. Because for me, it's like, you know, like I was on Tumblr in 2014, like SJW. And so I've kind of had it ingrained in me, like I've seen all this material before. And so it's interesting to see like, how do you get to college and you don't know about the oppression of all these people? That's just a thought.
Okay, so I agree with a lot of things that Carrie was saying whenever she was talking about the articles and how like it basically was restating everything in the TED Talk about all the how the white people have basically created like how they can say how the reason why the white supremacy was created because of black people or other races. And I liked in the TED Talk, it really stuck with me about how he said in order for white privilege to not be a thing anymore, it starts with white supremacy and white people not thinking that they're above everybody, and how whenever they're trying to solve it, they always try to put white privilege or white supremacy back on top and it be the main topic of everything. And so they're just not really creating any resolution, or they're not really fixing the problem. And then how it's like he said, to start with the problem, you have to fix the system first. And whenever he was first talking about how racism was created and everything, it really, because I never really like fully understood everything about the whole racism and how to be, I guess, politically correct about it or whatever. And so whenever he is like, yeah, racism is meant to be confusing and not really to be under like it's complicated or whatever, I was like, that makes a lot more sense and makes me feel better about not really fully understanding all of it and knowing everything about it.
For sure.
Yeah, Carrie, I like the fact that you point out how whiteness can be defined, but other races can be defined. And I found it kind of almost comical in a way. I remember I think on one of the article, it said that something about like, well, what white supremacy? Yeah, I don't remember where I'm going with that, but it's just interesting how like how pervasive um whiteness and the white supremacy can be. and and I remember it saying something about how like it, in any room you go to, it's kind of like you almost kind of have to conform to like the whiteness in a way. And even on one of the article, it says something about how like those workers are scared to speak up because they're scared of being uh, retaliated, being punished possibly, and they just have to like slip the note or like quietly tell the speaker about like thank you for doing this and stuff like that, because they're scared to speak out in the workplace. And it's kind of messed up. It's so messed up. But yeah, going off um on the TED Talk, is about I like how you um say about the socioeconomic aspect of it. Like some people will argue that they got to where they are because because of hard work, and you know it has nothing to do with privilege. um and that made me think of the social work reflection or something like that on one of the previous reading we read. Like people of color have to face so many more obstacles, like
Yeah.
I have written it down here, something like the myth of meritocracy allow people to be comfortable with their own place in the social order. Those privileged by their socioeconomic status may believe they have earned their place, while simultaneously and blatantly ignore the social, linguistic, educational, economic barriers that the oppressed face. This is oppression by force and deprivation. Yeah. So I just found that interesting. Um, I know my response is kind of fragmented, but yeah, we can talk about the details later.
Yeah, before we like get into other stuff, I really wanted to pinpoint like what you said about how in the article, I believe it was the Olio's article, how she had to slip him a note. I really sat with that for a little bit, and like, to be clear, like she slipped a note that said, "I will heal at home in silence." And that was just really powerful. Like she like felt like she resonated with his talk, but she still felt like she couldn't speak up. And like even in a place that was labeled as like a free like environment to like speak up, like I'm sure his talk was like great, but she still felt like she had to go home and deal with it in silence because like the people around her wouldn't understand or like wouldn't care to like hear what she said. So I really wanted to like highlight that note. Slipping was just a very powerful like part in that article. And right after that, he asked the question like, "Is that better than nothing?" And I thought that was really interesting, and I didn't know the answer to that. Like, is that better than nothing? Is like, are those talks that like have people going home and like thinking about it in silence? Is that better than like not having, any of those talks? So I would be curious to what you guys thought of that, because I don't know.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting too, like how it's like, how do you like if it's better, because sometimes you're like, I don't want to hear about this anymore, and going home and thinking about it just makes you like really feel down, like, and like I'm thinking of like relating to other situations, but like I can relate to that, like being like, I don't want to talk about it in public anymore. Like it's not, so I just have to go home and like be sad about it or be upset, and not know what to do, because sometimes it's like, is it better? Because especially that article, the whole time I was like thinking of that episode of The Office, and I haven't seen it in a really long time, but the like episode about where they have like a discriminate or a educator come in and it just goes awfully, which, whatever. But I was like, how, like, these people are doing such hard work and they're trying their best, but like, what does it actually do? Like, what's the point if no white people come? Like she said that it was, and I'm sure like some of them are required, but it seemed like that the majority of the population of the people who are in these like talks and classes were people of color, and they're not necessarily the people who need to hear it. Like, so I thought that was interesting that it was like only a couple of white people, and the whole point of it is not the whole point of it is for like white people to be educated and like be a better ally. And so it was like, well, what's the point like of that happening if they're not going to listen?
I think
Yeah,
that
I actually noted, sorry, you can go.
you're good. I was just going to say that kind of related back to what he said in the TED Talk too, about how he said the people who are most adamant about it sometimes know the least about what what the subject is that they're supposedly adamant about. So I feel like if we have more of those people, like white people in those classes getting educated, then they'd have I don't know the word for it. They'd have more of the people respect them for what they were saying of their opinions if they'd be more educated, know more about it. That's all.
Yeah, I actually noted what you said too, when you talked about how it's supposed to be for white people to come and learn about what they're doing wrong, but then even she said how the white people that come to her speeches often receive the message the wrong way and feel guilty or put pity on themselves somehow. So then, the point of the conversations, they're difficult, but they're supposed to educate rather than make people feel bad and shift perspective and like encourage unity. But that's also not the way they're received, unfortunately, a lot of the time.
I think it's interesting, like you can feel empathetic towards people, but you shouldn't, like, it's not your fault, your like place to feel like guilty. Like, I don't know, there's like white guilt and it just is a whole nother, there's so many like layers. But
Yeah.
like even like in my other class we were talking about last night, like aversive racism and like people who think that they're not racist but really they are because they're like colorblind, or like they're the people who are like, I have black friends so I can't be racist. The this little kid said that to me this summer and I was like, girl, I know you're 9 years old, but come on. But, it's just like, I don't even know what I was saying now, but it's just like, yeah, I don't remember what I was saying, so I'll just let one of you guys talk
No,
now.
yeah, that makes total sense. And like that goes back to like the TED Talk, how he like really was like, I don't want your sympathy. Like I don't want like to alleviate your white guilt. Like I'm not having these conversations like so that you can feel better about yourself. Like and I don't think that's really selfish to think. Like I think that in another context that could be, but like it's not like a person's like person of color's like job to like alleviate other people's like guilt about it. Like that's not like in the criteria. Like I didn't get a handbook like when I was born brown, like to be like, make sure you make white people like feel better. Like that's not something that they need to do. So I thought it was really awesome how in the TED Talk he was like, I don't want your sympathy. Like I'm not here to do that, but like I want like empathy. Like I want like you to like try to understand. I want you to like like see where I'm coming from. I want you to like, there's more than just like being like, oh, I feel so sorry for you. You know what I mean? So that like totally goes back to the TED Talk. And I thought that was really important. So that's all.
Yeah, I also want to talk about like how in the tech talk, this is something when we buy something, we subscribe to like the economic, I guess, right? But in the same way, our actions are like supporting the hierarchy, the structure of like racism, and that's yeah, that's really interesting. And like remember it's saying something about we are impacted by we're getting these messages all the time, and on one of the article it said how the security guard spray um let's see what it say exactly. No, not here. Oh, and every day he was fed culture messages about who had money and who didn't, who was violent and who wasn't. Charles argued that the security guard has been doing his job. In the white supremacist capitalist system, this is what your job looked like. So it just goes to show that the messages we get manifest themselves into the action and how we treat other human beings. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That also goes back to um, the TED Talk when he talked about how people talk about the bad side of town means it's like there's more like people of color there, and like these like messages like you said are in everything, and like even if people don't realize it, like they're still building that idea that like white is better or like white is safer, like you said in like this situation, like white like has money, white like isn't going to be violent. Like that is what the security guard like was feeding, like getting fed like by society. And then like on another, it just like it's crazy how it's like a part of everything. Like nothing can escape like these messages. Like I think that's crazy that everything is like touched by like racism and make it like everywhere. I don't know. I thought that was
Yeah.
interesting and sad.
I was thinking about that too, because even like in animals, like in nature, like there's this like, it's not a cool fact, I just think it's interesting that like during the slave trade and like the triangle, you guys remember in like middle school when you learned about the triangle of
Yeah.
trade, that even like the shark migratory patterns changed because of that, because they followed the ships with the people, the enslaved people on them who were thrown overboard to eat them. And so the entire shark's migratory pattern is different now because of that then, and it's still the same now, like not exactly the same, but it's like similar. So like it seeps into every like atom of our beings, unfortunately. And so that's the difficult part is, I think, like you were talking about socioeconomic status earlier, because I feel like a lot of conversations boil down to like, you're talking about how can we get like people of color interested in like, for example, like recreation, because that's what I'm in, like, and all the barriers to it is like transportation and money and whatever. And you just boil it down to like, there's no like economic, like they can't do it because of this like socioeconomic status, and then that's where the conversation stops. And so like that's like interesting to me that people always boil it down to this one thing and then never consider like the conversation doesn't continue, like how like there's no allyship necessarily, like at the end they just talk about it and then it's over. Like that other article we read a few days ago, with the guy who was the like self-reflection, and how like he ended it at the end with allyship, which I thought was really like important. And like in this too, like there's all these like rhetorical like questions being asked to make you think about it. So I think that's really important, like in these conversations, is to ask like what you can do and then actually do it and not just like boil it down to this one thing that's like always the bottom line.
For sure. Yeah.
Also, on the TED Talk, I like how the speaker distinguished between white privilege and white immunity, and how like white privilege is like white people asking themselves, how am I privileged? How am I privileged? And then like white immunity, on the other hand, it kind of like causes the person to ask themselves like, how is my experience different from the people of color? And so like it's kind of asking you to see what you have been blinded by, what you have been like socially inoculated by, which I kind of resonate, so I'm just gonna give like a brief history of like me, I guess. Like when I was at Thailand, everyone's around me is like my race, so I never really feel like race is a big part of me, but then when I came to the United States, I'm so different, so I have to constantly think about my own race, and in the same way I feel like being white in America, because everything is built around like whiteness, like the books, the structure, everything is built around whiteness. Like it's kind of hard to see yourself kind of like a specific race, you just are kind of like that. But people of other color, we're not just are, we're a certain color, you know. And I like when in the TED Talk when it said you have to understand that it is more difficult for people of color to survive and thrive in the white supremacy regime than it is for you to feel uncomfortable with the terminology. I felt that was pretty powerful, and in the reading in the article it said that like some people go to the talk not because they want to do something, but it's simply to just kind of ease their discomfort and their guilt. Um, yeah, I think maybe they have a good intention, but the 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 way to go about it is, I don't know, it's complicated.
Yeah, that was how at the end of his TED Talk, he was talking about how like people get uncomfortable when he talks about like the continuity and the connection with like the racism in the past. And then he like you said, he talked about how people get like tense and uncomfortable in those situations because they're like, no, like I'm not like racist, like I don't like act like I'm better than everyone because of my race, but like and then those conversations like end and they go about their day. And like you said, like white people don't really like have to think about their race all the time, just because like you said, it's everywhere, like in all the pictures and all like the advertisements. Like there's so much like white there's so many white people that like you don't have to have those conversations every day. But then if you're not white, like you're kind of forced to think about it every day. Like you're forced to like acknowledge and recognize it because like you're different, if that makes sense. And so I think like that was interesting how he was like, these conversations end for white people, but they never end for like other like people of color, like because they just don't, because like of how our like country is. And I thought that was really interesting. And I don't think it's like a bad thing, maybe. Like it's just like how it is, but I think like it's easily like fixed. I think like if someone wants it to be fixed, because like a white person can be having these conversations. Like, I mean, like you guys like are white and you're having this conversation, and like I like am comfortable, and like I know that you guys have these conversations like outside of this one like 30-minute conversation. And so I feel like it's like one thing that it's like can be fixed. Like you can have these conversations if you're still like white, even if you're not like forced to because you're a person of color, if that makes sense. Um, so I thought that was interesting and a little optimistic, I guess. That's all.
And going off of what you said, like, you know, being people of color, we have to constantly think about our race, and then someone will come and be like, I don't see color, you know. So going off of kind of like the video that we watched on one of the article, it said like, if you don't see color, then you're ignoring my reality, you know, because being this color, I have specific experience. I mean, we all have different experience, right, as human beings, but because of our color, there's like a specific experience that we have to go through that you might not know about, you know. I mean, who knows what you experience, but if you don't acknowledge my color, when you can clearly see that I'm like this color, then you're just like denying my experience. I thought that was like, if you don't see my color, you can't resonate with me. You can't understand or support like anything, you know. Like it just stops the conversation there, and yeah, I just found that pretty interesting.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of like when someone says that, like in my head, I'm immediately like, okay, then it's not worth like sharing any of my experiences with you, because like obviously you don't see that like I have those experiences because I'm not white. Like if you don't see like color, then like everything I say is not going to mean anything to you. So like that, like you said, it shuts down the conversation immediately. Um, but that brings up like the 3-minute like video in the painter episode that I thought was phenomenal, in which she like just gave 3 or 4 like myths that people use to like really stop those conversations of race. And I just wanted to get you guys' opinions and like why you think it's like an issue, and like what you really think about it. And the first one was, we already kind of talked about, I don't see color, and so that was the first one. The second one is that it's, people use the excuse that it's a class thing, not a race thing. And what did you guys think about that myth?
I think like the reason that they are like people of color are in like lower classes is because of racism in the first place. So it's like that's like kind of backwards. Like that's not the point. Like the reason that like I don't know, I think about like environmental racism, and it's like people who, the reason that they are like discriminated against in this way, like specifically with like CAFOs, which are like hog waste ponds basically. And in North Carolina, there's a lot of them. But the reason that these people are affected is because of their class, and that's because people are racist, and they still are, but like everyone's put into the boxes because of their race in the first place. And so like saying that it's a class issue is like completely like ignoring the systematic issues with racism.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And if you guys are in or have ever been in a sociology class, the Problems in America one, all you talk about is like links in race and economics and other factors, and it's all just tied together in this web. So, you know, it doesn't, what was the statement again?
It's a class thing, not a race thing.
Right. So you can't blame one or the other. It's all intertwined in American society, and it has been historically, unfortunately.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything else before I move on?
For for the both of the thing that you listed, it's two, right? Like about one is about socioeconomic in relation to race, and the other one is about not seeing color. Yeah, those two just pretty much halt the conversation, and in order to make like progressive, like meaningful change, you need to talk about it. But it's, of course, it's easier to ignore it if you're on the better side, and talking about it make you feel uncomfortable, then of course you much rather, ignore it. But we have to talk about it, because the problem isn't like something that the minority or like the people of color can fix per se, because the problem is in the structure, and the structure is built on the ground of like white supremacy, like historically speaking. And in order to for that to for you to get rid of that, you have to, like, the white have to fix the problem, because the problem is not within the people of color, you know. So, like, I guess my point is, it's easier to ignore the discomfort and the conversation that is needed to make meaningful change. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So for the sake of time, because I think that we're like at 20 or 30 minutes, I thought we should at least touch on the second question, which basically says, how do you think the information you acquired from this reading and TED Talk will inform your future practice in helping professions and or as a more informed community member? So I thought we could all answer that question briefly to wrap it up. And I'll start since I was the one to read it. I'll be brief. So I want to be a family and marriage counselor, and if I do nonprofit work, which isn't like really what I want to do, but if I do and I have the opportunity to, I'm going to deal with a lot of like people of color, and I think that is really important for me to like continue to have these conversations and continue to like be culturally competent and strive for that, and to listen to people and to like make sure that everybody knows that their story and their experiences like deserve to be heard. And I think that is something that really drives me, and like something that I want to do like every single day in my career, is to make sure that people like get the opportunity to share their experiences in like stories, like regardless of their race. And so I think that definitely like connects to what we were talking about today. Like just this conversation, for example, like I hope and I will and I want to have like more conversations like this in my everyday career. So yeah.
I can definitely, like, anyone benefits from like using like the community member. Like, you have to be informed to be a good community member and to be a good ally. But specifically in my profession, like there's not a lot of people of color in recreation, which I really want to change because like seeing like the way it's affected me and the way it's affected the people around me is like extremely beneficial, and I want everyone to be able to have these benefits and like see. But it's a white dominated profession and like activity because people don't see it. It's like a white activity. And so even like you can see it in the statistics in the national parks, only 1% of the people who go to national parks are Black. And so like it's crazy, like the statistics are crazy. And like we had one Black staff member this summer, and I talked to her about it a little bit too, not like out of the blue, like we're friends. It wasn't like a, hey, like you're Black, so I'm gonna talk to you about this. But it's like I need this information and I need to talk about it so that I can be an ally and so that I can get more people involved, like minority groups involved in recreation, because it's important, and like everyone like needs recreation or like leisure activities in their life to be a successful and happy person. And so it's extremely important to me that I like know this stuff and am able to use it in my field.
I want to do like, I'm not really sure like for everything I want to do specifically, but I know I want to deal with more of the little kid aspect. And so right now I'm volunteering at the advocacy center. And so how that would relate to there is because there's so many different cases and you have to deal with so many different home issues that I feel like there could easily be like, oh, like kind of like what we were talking about last night in class with one of the scenarios about how the stepfather was racist and was like making like the kid was by what she was half white, half black because the mom was white, I think he was saying. And so the stepdad was racist towards the daughter. And they were like, how did they not know that how did the mom not know that when she married him or whatever? And so I feel like that would be quite a bit of cases with that I would have to deal with, and how to resolve those issues by being educated and knowing like through talks like these about how to handle those situations and deal with those situations and everything.
So I kind of want to do something similar in the future. I want to work at this group home for children that have experienced trauma, and just being able to use this information to aid in my communication and understanding of a more diverse range of people, making sure that I'm, culturally sensitive and understanding. And I thank you guys for sharing your experiences too. I definitely learned a lot from that. So thank you.
Yeah, Ren, like you, I think it's, important that we are an informed member in the community. And I plan to go either into like business or to like medical, the healthcare side of things. But I also work a lot in my community in interpreting, if you guys remember. So just being informed about the different things. I mean, of course, I'm one of them too, in a way, but like understanding the different aspect and the kind of like the deficit and the obstacles that we have to face. It's the rabbit hole is like much more deeper than I thought. Growing up, I just thought it's just the way it is. We're we're immigrant. It's not our country. We look different. Therefore, it's normal that we get treated the way we do. It's just the system is not built for us. And I just accept it as is. But looking ahead, I'll have to face this a lot more. So I have to like make sure where I sit in this whole conversation, and how I'm gonna do to like what I have to do and what I should do to kind of like get through this almost, like to fight through this, and to know like what action I should take. Yeah, what's the best action I should take?
Well, that was an awesome talk. um, thank you all for sharing and allowing me to listen to all of you. I think that's all, right?
All right, I'll stop the call then.
Okay.
All right, bye guys. Good talk.
Bye.
Bye.